Are you thinking about retiring in Venice, Florida? There's a few things you should know before doing that. The first is summer. Now, when I say retiring in Venice, I don't mean like snowbirding it. I'm talking about people that are looking to be down here full time. Now, some of these other things will apply if you're just looking to snowbird, for sure. But this one, I think, is very, very important. If you're looking to retire in Venice and you haven't been down here in summer, I think you should. Because there's a lot of things that change about Venice compared to the winter. First and foremost, the city gets quieter quite dramatically. And what I mean by that is there's less traffic, there's less people in the stores and the restaurants and all that kind of stuff, which overall I think is a pretty good thing. That's a pleasant thing. That's great. And I think you should experience that to see what that is like, though, because it does change the vibe of the city, the downtown, everything. I mean, there's still people out, of course, but it's not the energy and the congestion or whatever you want to call it. Like, some people look at it as a good thing or a bad thing, but it's not the same as when you're here in the winter. And with that also comes a few other changes. So since things get a little slower that time of year and less people are here, certain businesses will maybe have a little bit limited hours, maybe certain days they'll close. There's one restaurant we like, I don't know if they're still doing this. It was a French restaurant in downtown Venice called Côte France. The owner, I think she's got we had heard anyway, a new chef there working there. So I don't know if they're still doing this, but there was a time, at least when we used to go there more frequently, where she would just close down for an entire month, I think in like August or September, just to go back to France. So, you know, those are some things to keep into consideration. I wouldn't say it's like the norm for places that close down for a month, but there might be one day a week that they're now not open, or just a little bit more limited hours. But on top of that, the weather. That's one other thing you want to be aware of. Especially, I don't know, it depends. It's weird. I've been talking to a lot of people lately that are, you know, we deal with a lot of clients that are looking to buy or sell in Venice. By the way, if you are looking to do so, we've helped a lot of people save a lot of money, avoid mistakes, and get answers to questions that are sometimes impossible to find online. We'd love to help you too. You can call or text our team at any time at 941-221-1897. We'd love to help you. But clients, family, friends, you know, that are around that retirement age. And it's so interesting to hear how people, as they get to that age, say, you know what, as I get older, I just can't stand the heat anymore. Or I can't stand the cold and I love the heat. And it could go one way or the other. I've heard both. And so I think it's very important that you have an understanding of which end of the spectrum you are on that, and, you know, how that would affect your day-to-day and your life if you're going to live down here. Now, I'm not saying, like, let's say you can't handle the heat. That doesn't necessarily mean you couldn't come down to Venice and retire. You just probably wouldn't go outside and do as much, or you spend some time outside in the water at a pool or at the beach, or you spend more time in restaurants and places with air conditioning. You know what I mean? So you'd have to like manage that way. But it might be the case that, like me, I do these walk and talk videos in August. I do them in July, September. This is right now I'm filming this, you know, the hottest months in Florida. I like sweating. I'm weird that way, but that's me. You know what I mean? And maybe that's you. So those are some things to consider. But on the flip side of the coin, and I would imagine if you're thinking about moving to Venice, maybe you haven't been here at all. And if that's the case, then I would recommend, if you can, trying to get down at least during summer or winter, one or of the two, but ideally if you can, both. You know, if you have an awareness of what it's like in summer, the only thing that really changes in the winter is it just gets a little more busy. You know what I mean? The weather's perfect. It's like, it doesn't get any better than winters here. But I would recommend you come in the winter if you can, just to experience what it's like with a little bit more traffic and people here, just so you kind of know what you're getting into for that time of year, and you can know what it's going to be like from season to season. Me personally, I like the changes in the seasons. There's pros and cons to each, but you know, I think it's, you know, just like anywhere else, like it's a change in season, and it's a change in the vibe. And it's not like you get, you know, up north, snow and the leaves falling and changing colors. You don't get as much as that. Well, the leaves do fall actually here on some oak trees in March, but it's not the same. It's not the same vibe as far as the weather and the seasons change goes that way. It's more with the vibe of the city and the people coming and going, and the temperatures and the humidity. Like, that goes down pretty considerably during the winter months, and like fall and spring I think are quite pleasant as well. But the summer, you got to be aware of that heat. Second thing I think you should be aware of is mobile home communities. Now, I want to put this into context. I'm not here to tell you, to try to convince you one way or the other of buying or not buying, but I do want to point out some of the pros and cons, because I know this is something that a lot of people consider as something that's a little more affordable. But there's some things you have to consider. So I've been through plenty of these, and I think they're fun just because it seems like a cool little community and people have their golf carts and you're close to each other and you can get to know people and hang out and have friends. Awesome. And it's more, affordable as far as the house goes. The home prices are often very, very low. But there's usually HOA or a lot rent that you have to pay that will add to your cost, so you'll want to be aware of that. And more so, I think you'll want to be aware of hurricanes. We have seen enough, especially if you get closer to the water, and not even actually, I take that back because I've seen some in Northport where they just got wrecked in hurricanes. Like if there is a home I would want to, one, not be in during a hurricane, and two, know that I have to be ready to completely lose, it would be a mobile home, because we have seen just some of those get completely destroyed. And if you watch the channel any amount of time, you would know that I am not doom and gloom guy. I call regularly a lot of these real estate channels that maybe will make everything sound like sunshine and rainbows, and I'll call it the channels that will say like, oh, Florida is the worst and it's crashing and hurricanes, and they'll point out all the negative things. I like to keep it real here. And so I will point out the nuances of like a home that maybe some things that could put you at risk, things that will maybe help put you less at risk, etc. And I will tell you, I've just seen enough mobile homes. Like I have a friend who his grandma lived in a mobile home that I had to give them a hand a little bit with some things after a hurricane, and just like going through the communities, man, it can be devastating. So if you buy one of those homes, you have to be aware that that is a possibility. And to have that as your only home, I would be a little worried personally. That's just me. Everyone's going to be different, but I just want to make sure you're aware of that possibility. Next thing you should know about retiring in Venice is there's a lot of retirees in Venice. So that's a nice thing to know, especially like if you come here during the winter, especially like there's a lot of snowbirds that come down to like Florida in general, but Venice is definitely one of those hot spots. Sarasota to the north of us is, and just as a whole, I think it's one thing to be aware of. Also within that, to be aware of the amount of activities they have. So this is kind of a separate bullet point, but it ties into that. And it's just like when you come to Venice in the winter, man, there's just so much going on in the downtown. There's always different activities and events. They have the Performing Arts Center that things got going on. There's like the little pavilion in the downtown. There's laughter, yoga, golf, of course. There's all this fishing, the beach, the stuff that you could do on your own. There's so much to do on your own, but there's just a lot of organized activities that are just great for getting to know other people when you're down here in the winter months and meet your Florida friends. We often describe on the channel, if you do move down here full time, you'll probably get like a Florida family. There'll be certain neighbors or people you meet that you just have something in common with or don't have anything in common with, and that makes them interesting because they're from a different state, and you'll just become really good friends with them to the point where it's like, if you need someone to help you out or to lean on, they're your Florida family. That's just, I don't know if that's everywhere, but like in Venice, that's definitely kind of a thing that we have acquired, and it's awesome. It's good to know that you have other people that you can count on and that will have your back and help you out just like family would, and vice versa. You would do the same for them. And that makes living here a lot better, obviously. And not just to have people look out for you, but people that you can connect with, hang out with, entertain each other, go out and do things with, and have that Florida kinship. And just, I don't know, there's something about being down here that is just like everyone's from somewhere different, so you're all excited to be here, you know what I mean? And you all have that in common, even though you have nothing else in common maybe, or maybe a few things in common, and you can find those things out and get to know each other. But it just makes it very easy to get to know people, and you can know coming down here that your mindset of, oh, I don't know anyone, I want to get to know some people, just about everyone else has that mindset. So that's pretty exciting. Another thing you should know about retiring in Venice, Florida. HOA versus non-HOA. There is a pretty good amount of options for both lifestyles. But I just want to point out the pros and cons of each, and that way you can maybe get an understanding if you do or don't want one. And you might already say, no, I don't, or yes, I do. But wait till you hear what I have to say before you make that decision, because it might change what you think. And I'm not trying to skew your perspective. Again, I'm just trying to make sure you're aware of the pros and cons and things that do and don't come with HOAs, because Florida's a little different. In an HOA community, more often than not, you are going to get sidewalks and streetlights. If you are not in an HOA community, more often than not, you will not. So if those are big things for you, you might want to be in an HOA, even if you didn't think you did. Now, Venice Island, there is the possibility of getting a home that maybe is by sidewalks or streetlights or some parks and things like that, which is awesome, without an HOA. But they're going to cost a little bit more, and there's just not as many options for that kind of thing, because usually like a lot of Venice Island, there's some homes but a lot of those aren't right by sidewalks and streetlights necessarily. And then the ones that might be are usually going to actually be more like condos and things like that. But it is an option and a possibility. But for the most part, you're looking at HOA to get sidewalks and streetlights. Also, some people want the HOA because they want the community to have a certain look and feel and aesthetic. The homes look a certain way. No, beater cars sitting in the front yard and the grass overgrown. You're not going to get that. But then you're going to get some people, and maybe this is you. You don't want anyone telling you what to do. You know you're going to take care of your property. You're going to find that neighborhood where things are taken care of, or maybe you just don't even care that much about how the neighborhood looks. Whatever it is that you're looking for, that's fine. But just knowing what you're getting into before you get into it, right? So South Venice, no HOA. Venice Gardens, no HOA. I would say for the most part though, both of those areas are pretty well maintained. So, you might be able to find something that fits your needs if you don't want the HOA. But again, in Venice Gardens, there is some sidewalks and some streetlights, but for the most part, a lot of the pockets of that and a lot of, South Venice, you're not going to get either. And then outside of that, there's a lot of planned communities that will have sidewalks, streetlights, tons of options for that. And there's varying levels of the cost of those HOA. And that's another thing. A lot of people don't want that monthly fee, or they're willing to pay it depending on what it includes, which is something I think that should be factored in. If you're talking like a condo, it might include your water bill. Some homes even will include like lawn maintenance, maybe even your shrubs and your trees. It just depends. So there's varying levels of that. And as always, we can help you, navigate that process and find what's right for you and know exactly what you're getting into and what the rules are, the restrictions, the fees, and what it all covers. Next thing you should know about Venice, Florida is hurricanes. You got to be ready for those and just be aware of those. I talked about this a little bit with the mobile homes, but just having a plan in place, understanding your location and your risks in that location. There's different, zones for evacuation depending on your risk for storm surge and things like that and flooding, and just, having like canned goods and a generator would be good. All those little things that can help you get through power outages and maybe damages and things like that. And just also having an understanding, again, with the buying process, like what are the risks with this home? Again, like I feel like a lot of times the risk actually gets blown out of proportion to make it seem way worse than it is. We've been through a few hurricanes and storms, and we had a fair amount of damage, and all the rest is just like either nothing happened to our home at all, or just enough to make it kind of a nuisance of little things to deal with. So those are some things to keep in mind with the hurricane side of things. Again, I don't think you should not think they're no big deal, but I also don't think you should necessarily look at them as being like, oh, for sure, if a hurricane comes, I'm going to lose my entire house, like some people would have you believe. But you do want to have an understanding of being prepared for them and knowing what you're getting into. And again, a good realtor will help you with that process and know kind of like what your risks are and what you should be aware of. Again, if you are looking to buy or sell in Venice, get a hold of our team, 941-221-1897. We help a lot of people avoid mistakes, save a lot of money, and get answers to those questions that a lot of times are hard to find online. And we would love to help you too. Call or text us anytime at 941-221-1897. If you want to know where we're all living in Venice, Florida, check out this video. Thanks for watching and live breezy.